It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is. All lies will be exposed. Even like in the rap world, like all of the rappers that you know that never been to jail and never got in any trouble with the law, but they talk as if their life is opposite of that. Like those are federal informants.
Welcome back to BuzzBuster. I'm glad you're here. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss daily videos. Katt Williams says he got an early look at the documentary 50 Cent is putting together, and according to him, the material was staggering. After seeing it, he reportedly went public with the names of 20 rappers he believes could be facing legal trouble before 2026 is over. What makes this so explosive is the footage itself. It's being described as rare, revealing, and serious enough to spark even more scrutiny around what has been happening inside the hip-hop world. That's why this story has people watching so closely. The big questions now are simple. What exactly did Katt Williams disclose? What is 50 Cent's documentary bringing to light? And why are so many people bracing for major fallout?
Did you actually expect it to be as big as it got?
I expected it to be bigger. It's actually exceeded my expectations now. It's outperforming Stranger Things on Netflix.
To see how this discussion reached such an intense level in 2025 and heading into 2026, you have to rewind to January 3rd, 2024. On that day, Katt Williams appeared on Shannon Sharpe's Club Shay Shay podcast and completely changed the tone of the conversation in entertainment. Instead of speaking in hints or using vague industry language, he was direct. For nearly 3 hours on camera, he laid out allegations, pointed to specific behavior, and made bold predictions in a way few expected. There was no mystery in how he delivered it. He said what he meant clearly and publicly, and the reaction was immediate. That interview went on to become one of the most talked about celebrity moments of the year, turning Katt Williams into one of the biggest viral names in entertainment. In 2024, Katt Williams dominated headlines as fans and critics alike started calling him a messenger of mayhem. Ever since January 3rd, one joke has refused to die online. People say his Club Shay Shay appearance somehow kicked open a door, unleashing long-held complaints about fellow comedians and what he described as the industry's hidden side.
According to Katt Williams, the first podcast with Shannon Sharpe was just a small taste of what he plans to reveal in part 2.
When I wrote it out to kill the careers of the people I was talking about, right?
This was far from an ordinary podcast stop. Nearly 86 million viewers tuned in to watch Williams deliver a marathon interview packed with sharp jokes, bold claims, and what many saw as stretched truths and wild theories. That number was enormous, not some tiny online bubble, not a niche audience tucked away in one corner of the internet. It was fully mainstream, and it hit with serious impact. What exactly sparked such a reaction? During the conversation with Sharpe, Williams declared that major figures he viewed as morally questionable would face consequences in 2024. He specifically named T.D. Jakes and added that, in his view, every lie would eventually come to light. That statement alone sent social media into overdrive. Still, he was only getting started. Over the course of the nearly 3-hour sit-down, Williams took aim at a long list of people in entertainment. Among those mentioned were Michael Blackson, Ludacris, and Kevin Hart. By the time the interview ended, the internet was already treating it less like a podcast and more like the moment a major public feud exploded into full view. Ricky Smiley and Tiffany Haddish came up too. Still, Katt Williams saved some of his sharpest criticism for Steve Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer, even claiming Cedric lifted material from one of his sets.
She said, today is my last day. I said, well, congratulations. I said, so what are you, if you don't mind me asking, what are you going to do? She says, I'm going to be the executive assistant to Katt Williams. I said, I've been trying to get Katt for over a year. This was a Friday. The following Thursday, Katt sitting in my chair.
Wow.
What truly matters here, though, is not the personal feuds. The real story is what Williams said about the machine behind the scenes and why that now connects to rappers facing prison time in 50 Cent's documentary. His Club Shay Shay interview began as a headline-making comedy moment, yet it quickly started to feel like something bigger, almost a warning about a coming shakeup inside the music business. Rather than focusing only on famous names, Williams pointed at what he described as a culture of silence, one he believed shielded a particular circle of powerful insiders. Pause on that for a second. This was never just an attack on one entertainer. In Williams' telling, the problem was an entire structure. He suggested that hip-hop, along with the wider entertainment world, had built-in protections that kept certain people insulated from consequences for years. More than that, he implied those protections were starting to crack. Perhaps the most explosive part was his reference to 7 supposedly untouchable figures, people so influential and so woven into Hollywood's corporate and social networks that exposing them, according to Williams, could trigger a complete unraveling, a total breakdown. 7 individuals. In Williams' view, these were the kind of people so heavily shielded that exposing them would shake the entire machine. He never plainly recited 7 names. Katt Williams is a comedian, and his style relies on suggestion. He leaves breadcrumbs, reveals just enough to spark attention, yet stops short of saying anything that could drag him into legal trouble.
So if you and a man was in a corner doing something you wasn't supposed to be doing,
you would tell it.
I know so many things I shouldn't know. When I walk in a room, heads go down.
That kind of careful wording is nothing new in entertainment. What happened next is where things really escalated. The internet rarely lets a remark disappear, and once that interview went live, viewers started dissecting every line. Each pause mattered. Every expression got analyzed. People began assembling timelines, comparing older interviews, revisiting social media posts, and digging through event photos from years past. Before long, online sleuths were trying to map out who those 7 people could be, while also looking at which other industry names might overlap with the conduct Williams seemed to be pointing towards.
One statement in particular caught fire. Williams said he had rejected $50 million more than once because he did not want to attend parties with certain powerful figures. He also suggested that 2024 would bring consequences for those people and others around them. That single claim changed the temperature of the conversation. Suddenly, it was not just gossip. To many watching, it sounded like a warning. The numbers alone tell a startling story about how far some people may go to secure silence or cooperation. According to Williams, one comedian was allegedly presented with $50 million on 4 separate occasions, bringing the total to an astonishing $200 million, all to take part in something he believed crossed the line.
There's a possibility that you might hear the haymakers very, very soon. He said he wrote it. I can tell you this, he's been writing more material.
That figure matters for more than its sheer size. It speaks directly to the culture Williams was describing inside the industry. When that level of money is supposedly on the table just to keep someone aligned, it raises bigger questions. What exactly is so important that it demands that kind of protection? How serious are the consequences when people stop playing along? Most importantly, what begins to unravel once that shield starts to crack? Katt Williams kicked off the year by making claims that many people initially saw as explosive. As time went on, more and more viewers felt his warnings were starting to match what they were seeing unfold. One post online captured that growing reaction perfectly, saying that the truth had finally started surfacing. It did not happen in one dramatic instant. Instead, across 2024 and into 2025, events appeared to develop piece by piece, almost exactly the way Williams suggested they would. After what many described as opening the floodgates, he also made it clear that he understood speaking out could come with personal risks. With one controversial interview, Katt Williams sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Back in early 2024, Shannon Sharpe sat down with Katt Williams on Club Shay Shay, and Williams made a striking promise. People hiding behind deception would face consequences, and the truth would come out. What happened next only made that interview feel even bigger. Although the conversation went viral again and again throughout the year, Katt Williams later revealed that viewers still didn't get the full version of what he wanted to say. During an appearance at Vulture Festival in November,
It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is. All lies will be exposed.
he explained that he originally intended to completely dismantle the reputations of the people he mentioned. According to Williams, his first version was far more severe, but he chose to pull back before the interview aired. Instead of delivering the most damaging details, he said he removed the strongest hits and kept only enough to send a message. In other words, the public heard the warning shots, while the people involved were meant to understand that he knew much more than he shared. Think about what that means. The version seen by the public, the one watched by 86 million people, the one that sent social media into a frenzy, was supposedly the restrained cut, not the full force.
Just a preview, that revelation added a whole new layer to an interview people already saw as explosive. Shannon Sharpe, looking back on that now famous Club Shay Shay moment, appeared to acknowledge the growing speculation that more was left unsaid and hinted that another sit-down with Katt Williams could still happen. You may not have to wait long before the biggest revelations land. That was the warning. With 2025 approaching fast, the message feels even loaded. First, Katt Williams suggested he didn't say everything. Next, Shannon Sharpe appeared to tease another conversation. Meanwhile, online speculation exploded as viewers linked Williams' remarks to real-world developments that seemed to follow almost immediately. During a later appearance on Theo Von's This Past Weekend podcast, Williams looked back on those statements and made it clear he understood exactly what he was stepping into. He said he felt honored to speak openly when the moment called for it, stressing that he approaches everything from a positive place first. That detail matters. He wasn't speaking carelessly. Williams understood the stakes. Challenging a system this large, backed by enormous influence and money, could come with serious consequences.
Everybody turned against me. Even 50 Cent turned against me. You don't want him as the enemy. But I couldn't be shook, because I remember I never done nothing to him in my life.
Even with that in mind, he chose to say it anyway. Why? In his view, the timing had finally lined up. He seemed convinced the moment had arrived for certain truths to be spoken out loud. That confidence is part of what made the interview hit so hard. Williams, who has described himself as an opponent of the Illuminati, also pushed back on the idea that 2024 was some random anomaly. To him, it marked the beginning of something bigger. In other words, he wasn't describing a one-off event. He was suggesting society had moved into an entirely new phase. We're living in a time when the truth is finally breaking through, he told GQ. In his view, it's not that people suddenly wanted honesty. What changed, he suggested, is that the powerful circles long tied to secret influence, hidden control, and the forces that quietly shape the world are now reaching their end. According to Williams, many of those figures are now in their 80s, 90s, or even older. His larger argument was really about generational power. For decades, the same group held control behind the scenes. Once that generation begins to fade, the systems they built no longer look untouchable. Safeguards weaken, cracks begin to show. Eventually, what was once tightly concealed becomes much harder to keep hidden.
That idea sets the stage for 50 Cent's documentary. By that point, Williams had already sparked the conversation. He had framed the moment as one where old structures were breaking down, long-standing protections were losing their grip, and people who had avoided scrutiny for years might finally have to answer for it. Naturally, that raised one big question. Who was going to carry that message forward? The surprising answer was Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent. Even so, Williams and 50 Cent occupy very different lanes. One built his reputation through comedy and sharp commentary. The other comes from a world shaped by music, business, and a very different kind of public presence.
Okay, so 50 Cent seemed surprised that Katt Williams roasted him in his recent comedy special. 50 said flat out, him and Katt are cool, so he's not going to respond to the squarehead joke. But he did say he's going to take a break before he ends up having no friends.
What makes this so striking is the way both men delivered the same message through completely different lanes. Katt Williams used comedy, sharp implication, and punchlines that carried uncomfortable truths. 50 Cent approached it like an executive, building content, producing narratives, and packaging those same hard questions into a 4-part documentary for the world's biggest streaming service. Still, the real connection between them never changed. Each of them looked at a flawed system and challenged it directly. Each one, in his own style, said the same thing. Something is wrong here, and the proof exists. Katt Williams lit the fuse during his appearance on Club Shay Shay. He created anticipation. He made it clear that a reckoning was coming, that certain protected figures would not stay shielded forever, and that the public would soon see more of what had been hidden. Once that attention was there, 50 Cent turned momentum into a product. He took the curiosity, the speculation, and the growing conversation and transformed it into a documentary event that pulled in a massive audience. The response was immediate. In just 6 days after release, the series reached 21.8 million views. That total made it the second most watched title on Netflix for the week of December 18, 2025, trailing only Volume 1 of Stranger Things Season 5. For a hip-hop documentary, those numbers were enormous. Viewers weren't just casually watching, they were showing up because the conversation had already started, and now they wanted the full story. That moment revealed everything about the public's craving for this kind of story. People were ready for it. Katt Williams helped spark that demand when he stepped onto that stage on January 3, 2024, and warned that a major fallout was on the way. Still, the Club Shay Shay interview was not the main event. It was the signal flare. The documentary became the opening act of that prediction coming to life. After that, the real ripple effect began. Non-stop speculation over which rappers might be the next to face legal trouble. To see how a comedian's explosive interview led to serious talk about as many as 20 rappers possibly ending up behind bars, you have to look closely at the stretch between January 2024 and December 2025. That period reshaped the legal climate around hip-hop. It matters who was already locked up, who was fighting charges, and who may have realized investigators were closing in.
Who gonna turn down $50 million? Now, I've had to turn down $50 million 4 times. 4 times. Just to protect my integrity and that virgin hole I was telling you about. Right. Because P. Diddy be wanting to party. And you gotta tell him no. You got to tell him no. I did.
By the time 50 Cent's documentary arrived, the number of rappers already in custody, headed to trial, or reportedly under investigation had grown into a significant list. More importantly, the film seemed poised to push even more names into that conversation. One of the biggest developments came in October 2024 when Lil Durk was arrested in connection with a murder-for-hire case tied to the 2022 shooting involving Quando Rondo's cousin. Los Angeles has become part of a much bigger story. Investigators claim the Chicago rapper financed a plot targeting Quando Rondo after King Von's death. Meanwhile, YNW Melly has remained behind bars since February 2019. He was charged in connection with the 2018 killings of 2 close associates, and after a mistrial in July 2023, the case was set to return to court in September 2025.
50 reacted to Lil Durk, and he backs Lil Durk in beating the murder case after he hired a huge, high-powered attorney, which is Drew Finman.
Another headline-making case involved Tory Lanez. In August 2023, he received a 10-year prison sentence for the shooting of Megan Thee Stallion, a trial that drew major public attention. Prosecutors said the confrontation happened after a July 2020 party when the 2 artists got into an alcohol-fueled dispute. Throughout the case, Tory maintained that he was not responsible, though he did not take the stand in his own defense. Fetty Wap is also serving federal time after admitting guilt in a drug trafficking case tied to narcotics distribution across Long Island in New Jersey. At first, his expected release was listed for 2027. More recent prison records, however, indicate that date has now been moved up to late 2026. Brooklyn rapper Casanova is facing a long stretch as well. He is serving a 15-year federal sentence after pleading guilty to racketeering and drug-related charges connected to the guerrilla Stone Nation. After turning himself in 2020, he was sentenced in 2023, and his projected release extends far into the next decade. By March 2025, Bronx drill artist K Flock had been convicted in federal court on racketeering conspiracy, attempted murder, and firearms counts linked to alleged gang activity. Since his arrest in 2021, he has remained behind bars, and his sentencing exposure now stretches from a 10-year mandatory minimum all the way to life in prison.
That case is only one piece of a much bigger picture. The complete list goes far beyond this, and each situation connects back to the wider music industry patterns that both Katt Williams and 50 Cent have been calling out. This was the climate surrounding Williams' warning and 50 Cent's documentary rollout. Pressure was already building on hip-hop from every angle. Federal investigators were putting together RICO cases aimed at entire groups. Serious criminal accusations were reaching artists at the top of the charts. Drug trafficking convictions were also piling up around rappers who many believed had already moved on from that world. Against that backdrop, Katt Williams went on national television and made a striking claim. This was only the start. So, when 50 Cent revealed he was developing a documentary, the reaction across hip-hop was not shock. Nobody was caught off guard that he wanted to tell this story. Given everything happening in real time, it felt less like a surprise announcement and more like the next chapter in a story the culture could already see unfolding.
How did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figure most journalists would not disclose their sources.
Does he know y'all have this in the doc?
I would doubt,
What stunned people first was the sheer size of it all. Even more shocking, though, was the extent of what he said he had uncovered. In 2024, Jackson revealed that he was executive producing a documentary centered on allegations of sexual abuse and sex trafficking called Sean Combs' The Reckoning. The film later arrived on Netflix on December 2, 2025. At a glance, the title makes the subject clear. Look a little closer, however, and it points to something much bigger, with ties reaching far beyond one person and into the wider hip-hop world, the entertainment business, and the powerful figures moving through both. Speaking with NBC News, Jackson explained that he and director Alexandria Stapleton had spent more than a year putting the project together. More than a year! That kind of timeline says a lot. It does not sound like a rushed production built around a trending headline. Instead, it suggests a careful, intentional effort to assemble something far more detailed and far more complete. Once you consider what came out of that long development process, it becomes easier to see why Katt Williams' comments about the industry started landing differently. What once sounded like wild jokes began to feel a lot more like warnings. On December 7th, 2023, executive producer Curtis 50 Cent Jackson announced that he was developing. Proceeds from the docuseries were intended to support victims, and the work behind it began long before cameras started rolling. For 5 months, Jackson was already deep into the process before Alexandria Stapleton was even brought in to direct. During that stretch, he was searching for people with first-hand knowledge who were willing to come forward and speak honestly. That kind of preparation says a lot. This was not a rushed production or a casual media project. Jackson appeared to be methodically assembling information, finding voices connected to the story, and documenting what could be said on the record. Piece by piece, he was building something far more serious than a simple interview series. Stapleton later explained that every possible effort was made to reach as many relevant people as they could. She said there were numerous private conversations that never made it on camera. In several cases, she was able to speak with individuals who helped confirm details and verify parts of the story, even though they refused to sit for interviews themselves. Their reasons, she noted, varied widely. Still, one theme kept surfacing: fear. That detail changes everything. According to Stapleton, fear was a major factor, and the influence surrounding the situation stretched far beyond what many people realized. Her comments echoed what Williams had been saying on Club Shay Shay. The structure around this story was powerful. Its reach extended a long distance, and people were clearly uneasy about stepping into the spotlight. People caught in the middle are scared, and that's where the 140 hours become impossible to ignore. 50 Cent has repeatedly hinted that he's sitting on more than 140 hours of unfiltered footage, reportedly filmed by a journalist brought in to document a redemption story. According to those claims, the material includes real-time phone calls to lawyers and influential allies as legal troubles started mounting. Here's what makes that detail so explosive. The Netflix project, 140 Hours, ended as just 4 episodes. 4 episodes pulled from a massive archive. That leaves most of the footage unseen. A huge amount never reached the public. According to 50 Cent, releasing everything would completely change the story people think they understand. In his view, the full collection would leave no room for the carefully shaped version that ultimately made it on screen. That raises an obvious question. Why was so much left out? One interpretation is that certain names, or the people speaking for them, pushed to keep specific parts from appearing in the final cut, all to shield the wider industry machine. Suddenly, Katt Williams' earlier remarks start to sound much more connected to this documentary. He spoke about a protection system. He suggested some individuals were effectively off-limits. At the same time, 50 Cent was publicly acknowledging this enormous archive, sharing only a small piece of it, and making it clear that the missing footage could tell a very different story. A complete release of that material could have been catastrophic.
50 Cent, an executive producer, won't say. Neither will director Alexandria Stapleton. They insist only this: the footage was obtained legally, and they have the rights.
The message behind it was impossible to miss. Those recordings reportedly included names, private exchanges, and details far beyond what the public was ever meant to access.
Originally, the video was shot by a videographer brought in to capture his life and mounting legal troubles for a personal documentary. Everything about it was intended to stay controlled and carefully shaped. Once the arrest happened, though, that plan reportedly fell apart. A freelance third party is said to have leaked the footage while the main documentarian, Michael Oberlis, was out of town. Speaking to Rolling Stone on December 11th, Oberlis said the leak had nothing to do with money. According to him, it was an act of betrayal by someone who improperly passed the material to 50 Cent. In other words, this footage was never meant to land in 50 Cent's possession. What was supposed to remain a tightly managed personal project suddenly ended up with someone who had no reason to protect the story and every reason to put it under a spotlight. That shift changed everything. Just before the documentary premiered, attorneys sent Netflix a cease and desist, claiming that private pre-indictment footage had been used without authorization. They criticized the film as a disgraceful attack, yet Netflix moved forward and released it anyway. Meanwhile, 50 Cent publicly brushed off the legal warning. His reaction made one thing clear. He may not understand why the recordings existed, but he was more than happy they did. That single move reveals exactly how 50 Cent handled the situation. There was no retreat, no quiet compromise, and no sign of hesitation. Instead, he pushed harder. Each attempt to undermine the documentary or shut down the conversation only gave him another chance to make it louder and harder to ignore. Jackson made his position clear. If he stayed quiet, it could look like hip-hop as a whole was willing to overlook the behavior being shown and accept the image attached to that person simply because nobody spoke up. That was more than a casual comment. It defined his mission. Rather than treating the project like another piece of entertainment, he presented it as something bigger. In his view, remaining silent meant becoming part of the problem, and he refused to take that role. This is also the point where the discussion around 20 rappers possibly facing jail starts gaining momentum. While the documentary centered on one individual, reports claim the full archive includes 140 hours of material, filled with conversations, calls, and interactions involving a far broader network. According to those reports, the footage may place attention on people connected to situations they likely never wanted examined. Some were allegedly present in spaces that now raise serious questions. Others were said to have made calls or taken part in actions that, if clearly documented, could create real legal concerns. That is why speculation has only continued to grow. According to the claim, the people Williams allegedly cautioned about were the same names removed from 50 Cent's final cut after intense legal concerns, distribution risks, and corporate image protection stepped in. That's the exact pressure point Williams had described, a circle of figures seen as shielded from exposure. Reports suggest 50 Cent had recorded material that may have pointed toward those individuals, yet the version that reached Netflix told only a small part of the story. What viewers focused on right away was not simply what appeared on screen, but what never made it there in the first place. When the documentary arrived in late 2025, the biggest reaction online centered on the missing material. That matters. Usually, a documentary sparks debate over its revelations. Here, the louder discussion was about the omissions. Instead of being satisfied with 4 episodes, audiences immediately started asking about everything left behind.
The most repeated question was simple. What happened to the other 136 hours, and whose names were mentioned in that unseen footage? That's where this ties into the broader conversation about rappers facing legal trouble. The recordings exist, the discussions were captured. Whatever those materials contain, they remain in someone's hands. If certain names do appear in that unreleased footage, it suggests the real story may be far larger than what the public was allowed to watch. People connected to the footage already know exactly what it is. They understand 50 Cent has it, and they also understand that more could surface whenever he decides. His comment about selling the combinations later feels less like a joke and more like a warning. It points to a bigger story still waiting in the wings, one that could completely change how people see everything, depending on the timing and the way it is revealed. In other words, what the public has seen so far may only be the beginning. The real impact appears to be tied to whatever remains unreleased. If that full combination ever comes out, it could force the industry to confront a much larger picture than anyone expected.
This is how 50 Cent acquired the footage for the Diddy documentary. He gained access to a large archive of videos Diddy had been filming for his own private documentary, including behind-the-scenes moments in daily life leading up to his 2024 arrest. Diddy never fully paid for or cleared the footage, so 50 paid and legally obtained the rights to use it.
Now, shift to the documentary itself and the material that actually appeared on screen, because that is where things start getting especially interesting. Included in the film is previously unseen footage centered on legal concerns in the days leading up to the arrest. Jackson refused to explain how he obtained the clip, which only added more mystery to the moment. Reports say the video was recorded in early September 2024, only days before the arrest took place. In that scene, someone is seen inside a hotel room speaking on the phone and discussing legal strategy. What gives the footage real weight is not simply the conversation itself. The bigger question is who was on the other end of those calls, because that detail could matter as much as anything that was actually said.
This wasn't just a person asking for help. It was someone inside the inner circle, brought in when the pressure was mounting and the situation was starting to unravel. At one point in the footage, a striking line is heard. They needed to find someone willing to work with them. Someone experienced in the most questionable kind of business. That paints a revealing picture. Just days before an arrest, the search appears to be focused on an attorney known for handling extremely serious cases. It suggests someone who may have understood exactly what was approaching and was scrambling to build the strongest defense available. What makes this even more explosive is who may have been involved on the other end of those calls. The people who picked up, gave guidance, or helped shape a response could draw legal attention of their own if prosecutors were ever to review the complete footage in full. That is how one arrest can suddenly widen into something far bigger. The issue may no longer be limited to a single person's alleged actions. Instead, attention can shift to the wider circle that may have supported the conduct, benefited from it, or helped keep it out of public view. Once that kind of network is captured in real time, on camera, the legal risk can spread fast to everyone connected. Episode 4 of the documentary, titled Blink, more accusers come forward in this segment, each describing misconduct that eventually helped spark a federal investigation, followed by the 2024 arrest and the highly publicized trial. What makes this episode especially striking is who appears in it. Viewers hear from two jurors, a former entertainment executive and producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones. Jones did not arrive with a distant opinion or a secondhand story. He handed filmmakers footage gathered across 13 months while working closely beside the subject. That is not a quick snapshot. It is more than a full year of material captured from the inside. His role goes even further. Beyond supplying video, Lil Rod Jones also brought his own lawsuit. In that filing, he identified individuals, outlined alleged incidents, and laid out details that could serve as a path for investigators. Once that is paired with another 140 hours of footage, along with testimony collected during the making of the documentary, the scale of what has been assembled becomes hard to ignore. This is the kind of unraveling Katt Williams seemed to be hinting at when he suggested the system would eventually give way. The point was never just that one powerful figure might go down. The bigger implication was that if one piece broke loose, others connected to it could follow. The relationships run deep. The overlap is extensive. The record is broad. Those who believed they were shielded may now be learning that protection does not last forever. Jackson's friction with parts of the hip-hop industry goes back many years. One flashpoint came in 2006 when 50 released a diss record suggesting that certain people in the business were connected to a killing. Since that moment, the rivalry has kept simmering through online shots, public comments, and competing business moves. This wasn't some sudden reaction. 50 Cent has been building this perspective for decades, watching closely, keeping receipts, and gathering insight from inside the industry.
It's much more fun to be his friend than it is to be his enemy.
What'd you just say?
Because this guy is fucking relentless.
The guy who actually shot me is dead.
Because 50 Cent is coming.
By the time a documentary became possible, he was in position to move fast. He already had the relationships, the material, the experience, and the reach to bring it together. Even with all that history, Jackson has downplayed the idea that it's personal. Speaking about the tension, he said there was no real beef between them. In his view, if he truly hated someone, he would not go out of his way to work with their children. He also pointed out that the two had never actually done anything directly to each other. According to Jackson, what people are seeing is more like competitive energy, the kind of remarks artists throw around in hip-hop culture. That point stands out for a reason. Quincy Brown and Justin Combs both appeared in Power Book 3, Raising Kanan, and Power Book 2, Ghost, two series produced by Jackson. In other words, this is someone who gave opportunities to the children, even while the long-running tension stayed in the background. This was never the behavior of a man acting out of pure personal hate. Something far more calculated was at work. Yes, there was a clear drive to bring hidden facts into the light, but there was also careful planning behind every move. He knew exactly how to place himself where his influence would hit hardest. Rather than keeping distance from the people he opposed, he stayed close enough to watch, listen, and learn. Over the years, that access became power. Eventually, it gave him the tools to build a documentary strong enough to send shockwaves through the entire business. What made it so explosive was that it did not focus on a single figure alone. The bigger story was about a whole structure operating behind the scenes. That structure, according to Katt Williams, involved not just rappers, but producers, executives, attorneys, and various intermediaries who helped preserve a culture of silence. Once that kind of network is captured in real time, on camera, the legal risk can spread fast to everyone connected. The idea of rappers ending up behind bars did not begin with Katt Williams or 50 Cent. That discussion was already underway long before them. The pressure was already building in neighborhoods, courtrooms, and federal offices, where RICO cases had been taking shape well before Williams or Jackson spoke publicly. What Williams and 50 Cent changed was the lens. They linked scattered arrests to a much larger pattern, turning isolated headlines into evidence of something more entrenched. Once that connection was made, the conversation shifted in a major way.
To grasp how serious this had become, you have to look at who was already caught up in the legal system when the documentary arrived. For years, hip-hop artists have lived under intense public attention. By 2025, however, multiple high-profile rappers were facing incarceration while dealing with major criminal cases. The charges ranged from drug-related offenses to allegations involving violent acts. Taken together, these cases point to deeper issues tied to race, justice, and the way media narratives are shaped. Many trial details remain sealed or limited from public view. Yet, the information that is available suggests a troubling pattern. Reports indicate that incarceration rates among rappers are closely tied to economic disadvantage and broader systemic inequality. The numbers make that even harder to ignore. According to Bureau of Justice Statistics data released in 2024, the number of incarcerated musicians rose 7% compared with 2023. Hip-hop artists accounted for 42% of that increase, nearly half. That kind of concentration does not happen by accident. What Williams and 50 Cent pointed to doesn't look like a coincidence anymore. It feels like a repeating cycle. Hip-hop has long had a complicated tie to the justice system, and recent cases suggest that tension is only growing stronger.
To understand the bigger picture, look at the legal battles already unfolding when the documentary premiered. Each case adds another strand to the wider network Williams was talking about. Take Lil Durk. In October 2024, he was arrested in a case tied to an alleged murder-for-hire plot connected to the 2022 Los Angeles shooting that killed Quando Rondo's cousin. Investigators claim the Chicago rapper placed a bounty on Quando following King Von's death and paid for 5 men to travel to California in an effort to target him. This is what makes the accusation stand out. It isn't a narcotics case. It isn't a weapons possession charge. Prosecutors are describing it as a murder-for-hire allegation aimed at one of the most successful artists in rap today.
50 reacted to Lil Durk, and he backs Lil Durk in beating the murder case after he hired a huge, high-powered attorney, which is Drew Finley.
That detail changes the weight of the story. We're talking about a major star, someone with chart success, enormous wealth, and a massive fan base. According to the allegations, those same resources were used to finance a deadly plan. Viewed through the lens of the larger conversation, the case becomes more than a headline. It becomes another example of how fame, money, street ties, and criminal accusations can collide inside hip-hop in ways that are impossible to ignore. If Durk is found guilty, the impact goes far beyond one case. It tells every rapper watching that success, wealth, and celebrity cannot shield anyone from the justice system. That warning echoes what Katt Williams said on Club Shay Shay. The days of being treated like you are beyond consequences are coming to an end. Another name still tied up in the courts is YNW Melly. He has remained in custody since February 2019, facing charges connected to the 2018 deaths of 2 associates. His first trial ended in a mistrial in July 2023, and the retrial was set for September 2025. For years, the case has continued to stretch forward, moving from one courtroom battle into another. Prosecutors claim Melly was responsible for the deaths of 2 close friends and later attempted to stage the scene to resemble a drive-by. If a jury convicts him, the possible punishment in Florida is the death penalty. Tory Lanez is another major figure caught in a legal storm. Born in Canada as Daystar Peterson, he was convicted in the Megan Thee Stallion case and received a 10-year prison sentence in August 2023. Even after the verdict, Tory has continued to maintain that he is innocent. During the trial, however, he did not take the stand in his own defense. His appeal argues that certain evidence should not have been allowed and also raises claims of prosecutorial misconduct. Even so, he remains incarcerated while trying to overturn the conviction, and the appeal faces serious obstacles. For some of these artists, the road ahead is still extremely difficult. One of them is expected to spend a large chunk of a 10-year sentence in prison before any real chance at freedom appears. Fetty Wap is another major name still in federal custody. After pleading guilty in a drug trafficking case involving narcotics moved through Long Island and New Jersey, he began serving his sentence with an original release date set for 2027. New information from prison officials now shows that date has been pushed up to late 2026. Until that time, he remains incarcerated, and once he is released, supervised release will follow. Casanova is facing even a longer stretch. The Brooklyn rapper is serving a 15-year federal sentence after pleading guilty to racketeering and narcotics charges connected to the Gorilla Stone Nation. He turned himself in during 2020, was sentenced in 2023, and his expected release date lands deep into the 2030s. Even after factoring in time already served and any possible reductions, he is still likely to remain behind bars through most of the next decade. K Flock is also dealing with serious federal trouble. In March 2025, the Bronx drill rapper was convicted in federal court on racketeering conspiracy, attempted murder, and firearms charges tied to alleged gang activity. He has been locked up since his 2021 arrest and is now waiting to be sentenced. The possible sentence in this case is staggering: a mandatory minimum of 10 years with life in prison as the maximum. Sentencing was set for December 2025. Another name on the list is Tay K. When he was just 16, prosecutors said he was involved in a home invasion robbery where a 21-year-old lost his life while Tay-K was on house arrest. Before his trial began in 2017, he removed his ankle monitor and fled. Later that same year, U.S. Marshals captured him, and by 2019, he received a combined 55-year prison sentence for murder. Mystical is also facing a long legal battle. The New Orleans rapper has remained behind bars in Louisiana since his July 2022 arrest on first-degree rape and related charges. Multiple judges have turned down his requests for bond, leaving him in custody as he waits for a trial now scheduled for 2026. C. Murder's case has remained controversial for years. The Louisiana rapper is serving a life sentence at the Louisiana State Penitentiary over a 2002 nightclub killing. Even now, supporters continue to challenge the conviction and argue the case is far from settled. Big Lurch is another rapper serving life without parole. Since 2003, the Texas artist has been imprisoned after being convicted of killing his roommate in a case that shocked the public and cemented one of hip-hop's most notorious criminal stories. This remains one of the most closely watched cases. With a sentence of life without parole, there is no ordinary path to release. Unless an appeals court reverses the conviction or his sentence is officially reduced, he is expected to stay behind bars for the rest of his life. Another name tied to major legal fallout is Unfunk, Young Thug's brother. In 2023, he was ordered to serve 9.5 years in prison after prosecutors said he violated the conditions of his plea agreement in the YSL racketeering case. According to the state, possession of a firearm broke the deal and prompted the judge to withdraw the earlier break he had received. As it stands, that ruling could keep him incarcerated deep into the next decade unless post-conviction relief changes the outcome. Kid Creole is also on the list. The hip-hop trailblazer and founding member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five is currently serving a 16-year sentence in New York following a first-degree manslaughter conviction. Blueface's situation has become especially tangled. In January 2024, he was given 7 months in jail for violating probation connected to a 2021 assault case. Later the same year, he was hit with a 4-year prison sentence tied to a separate probation violation in a 2022 shooting case. By November, he faced more legal trouble after being arrested again over allegations that he assaulted a bouncer at a California lounge. By July 2025, that list only covered rappers who were already in the legal system or had just been convicted. It left out everyone still being investigated but not officially charged. It also excluded people mentioned in civil lawsuits without any indictment, along with anyone whose name may appear in the hundreds of hours of footage tied to 50 Cent that still has not been made public. That is why Katt Williams saying 20 rappers could end up in jail did not sound random. He appeared to be reacting to a legal situation that was already packed with active cases, while suggesting that a documentary could add even more pressure to it. Here's how that process usually works. Once investigators obtain video, recorded calls, event footage, and financial records, they put every piece to use. Cases are built from those materials. Connections between people get identified. Money trails are followed. Entire networks start to come into focus. Everything changes when one arrest leads to a flood of evidence and testimony. At that point, the legal risk does not stay limited to one person. It can quickly spread to anyone closely connected to that individual, especially if the material points to a wider circle of involvement. A similar pattern was seen in the 6ix9ine case back in 2018, when the rainbow-haired figure at the center of it became part of a much larger legal unraveling. The rapper had already been linked to 5 separate gun-related incidents before getting swept up in a major RICO prosecution targeting the 9 Trey gangsters. Just 3 months after his arrest, everything changed. He became a government witness and began describing the alleged inner workings of the Bloods-connected organization in remarkable detail. For someone with a profile as massive as 6'9", that kind of cooperation was almost unheard of. No artist at that level had worked with prosecutors so openly or so extensively. In the end, he received a relatively light 2-year prison sentence, but whatever credibility he once held in hip-hop was nearly gone. More importantly, the 6'9" case shows exactly how these situations can unfold. Once one person starts cooperating, the pressure spreads fast. A statement leads to new arrests. Those arrests bring more witnesses to the table. Before long, the entire structure begins to unravel. That same pattern now appears to be hanging over the hip-hop world. Several cases are moving at once. More than one cooperating witness is already involved. Different lines of evidence are building at the same time, all pointing in the same direction. At the center of this storm is a documentary containing 140 hours of footage, and only a fraction of it has been made public so far. The artists already sitting behind bars may be only the beginning. Those currently under investigation could be next. A second wave is already in motion. Beyond that, a third could emerge from the unreleased footage, especially if more rapper names surface in what has not been made public. Should that happen, the number of rappers dealing with legal fallout could climb to 20 or even higher. That is not a dramatic guess. It's a straightforward conclusion based on the volume of activity surrounding these cases.
Consider what is already on the table. Multiple active investigations, cooperating witnesses, several channels of evidence, and a documentary producer openly saying there are 136 additional hours of unseen footage. Put all of that together, and the possibility of more charges becomes hard to ignore. Back in January 2024, Katt Williams appeared on Club Shay Shay and seemed to recognize the direction this was heading long before most people caught on. While others were still piecing things together, he was pointing to a larger pattern and warning that something bigger was taking shape. One of his most striking points was not centered on a single celebrity. Instead, he focused on the industry framework itself. Williams described what he believed was a system inside entertainment that had long shielded certain people from accountability. According to him, that protection was beginning to break down. His argument went beyond calling out individuals. He was describing a culture of silence, one he claimed had helped protect a particular circle of powerful figures for years. One phrase unlocks the entire story of what's unfolded since January 2024. A culture of silence. Once you see it, everything starts to make sense. It sheds light on why some names escaped scrutiny for years despite long-standing concerns. It also reveals why so many people who say they were harmed chose not to speak, and why witnesses still avoid appearing on camera. Most of all, it shows why once that silence cracked, the fallout came fast and hit hard. This silence operates in layers. At its foundation, the driving force is money. People are encouraged to stay quiet through direct payouts, high-paying deals with unstated expectations, or pressure that puts their careers at risk. Financial leverage becomes the mechanism that keeps difficult truths buried. Katt Williams addressed that dynamic head-on. He said he was offered $50 million on 4 separate occasions to take part in things he believed crossed the line. According to Williams, he rejected those offers to protect his integrity. He described a world where certain industry figures wanted access, participation, and compliance, and where saying no came at an enormous cost. Still, he says he refused every time. Pause on that for a second. That adds up to $200 million in offers made to one comedian. If that level of money was being used in a single case, it raises a much bigger question about how far the system really reached. If that kind of money was aimed at just one person, imagine what the total bill looked like across the whole business just to keep mouths shut. How many singers, producers, label bosses, and insiders were getting the same kind of deal? More importantly, how many accepted it? Money is only one layer. The deeper force is access. In entertainment, access decides everything.
It opens the door to recording sessions, distribution, radio support, major events, private gatherings, and those closed rooms where careers are shaped behind the scenes. Those privileges can appear overnight, and they can disappear just as fast, depending on whether someone follows the unspoken rules. For rappers, the stakes are even higher. A single career can rise or collapse based on the gatekeepers controlling those opportunities. Stay in their good graces, and suddenly you get collaborations, public endorsements, prime placements, and media attention. Fall out of favor, and it can feel like you never existed at all. That kind of pressure creates a powerful reason to keep quiet about whatever someone may witness or hear. Speaking openly can cost more than reputation. It can shut off every path forward. Once access is gone, a career can unravel fast. That appears to be the kind of system Katt Williams was describing when he claimed certain comedians were industry plants.
You've probably heard Kevin Hart bragging about how he's the hardest working comedian in the game. But here's the thing, while he loves to talk up his work ethic, there are a lot of people who have dropped hints that Kevin's success isn't just about hard work. And Katt Williams, he's not the one to mince words. Katt is done with throwing hints and making insinuations, and he's now directly calling out Kevin for being an industry plant.
Kevin Hart was also one of the people Katt criticized, suggesting his rise was tied to larger forces inside the business. Some people are seen as industry creations, stepping into major TV opportunities before proving themselves the way comedy legends once had to. Inside comedy circles, that label carries a deeper meaning. It suggests that success does not always come from skill by itself, but sometimes from playing along with an unspoken structure behind the scenes. Once someone becomes part of that machine, staying there often depends on silence. Keep your head down, protect the system, and the rewards continue. Speak up, however, and the pressure changes fast. That brings us to the third layer, fear. If influence, money, and access fail to keep people in line, intimidation becomes the next method. Katt Williams addressed that reality head-on. After his 2024 Club interview, he made it clear he understood there could be real safety concerns tied to what he had said. This was not an offhand remark. Those words came after time to think, after witnessing the reaction to the interview, and after seeing the ripple effects of opening that door. He knew that publicly challenging the system could come with consequences. Even so, he signaled that he was mentally prepared for whatever might follow. The documentary reinforced that sense of unease. The director pointed out that some people were clearly hesitant, suggesting the atmosphere surrounding these revelations was far more serious than simple industry gossip. Several people agreed to help confirm parts of the story, yet they refused to sit for interviews. Their hesitation came from many places, but one feeling stood above the rest: fear. The reach of this network seemed enormous. Even those who were comfortable speaking privately, and even those willing to help check the facts, would not attach their names or faces to what they knew. That says something important. This silence is not driven only by money or industry connections. It is rooted in real intimidation. People worried about payback. Some feared losing their careers. Others were concerned for their personal safety.
Here's why that matters when people ask why certain rappers are only now facing legal trouble. A culture of silence can delay accountability for years. Potential witnesses stay quiet. Alleged victims hold back. People close to the situation avoid cooperating. Without testimony, without first-hand accounts, and without insiders willing to speak, prosecutors often struggle to build strong cases. Everything changes once that wall of silence starts to crack. When someone like Katt Williams speaks out and says the truth will come to light, attention shifts. When Scent puts out a documentary examining how the machine works behind the scenes, more questions get asked. Once lawsuits begin piling up and more voices feel safe enough to step forward, the entire conversation changes. What once seemed untouchable suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Once insiders begin speaking with federal investigators, everything changes. It never stays contained to one name. The fallout spreads outward, pulling in everyone connected to the larger machine. That's the pattern that has been unfolding since January 2024.
The first visible crack came when Williams gave that interview. Pressure kept building as lawsuits stacked up over the course of 2024. September 2024 pushed the story even further when the arrest took place. By December 2025, after 50 Cent's documentary was released, the whole situation appeared to burst into the open. At that point, attention started shifting beyond the central figure and onto the wider network around him. Scrutiny began landing on those who allegedly enabled the conduct, funded it, showed up at events where it reportedly happened, or made calls that may have helped keep it hidden. Others were accused of pressuring witnesses or arranging quiet settlements. A large share of those caught in that spotlight, though not every single one, come from inside the music business. Some are rappers, others are producers or executives. Many are people who built successful careers within that world and benefited from the protection that system seemed to offer. Now those layers of cover appear to be disappearing. With that shield weakening, people who once felt untouchable are being seen in a very different light. In moments like this, hip-hop can seem constantly on the edge of another courtroom battle, even while some artists are still celebrating. Even with some recent not guilty outcomes, several rappers are still caught in active legal battles.
When people say I'm a troll, I say, I don't know why you're saying I'm trolling people. I'm doing what you've conditioned me to do.
For a number of them, the stakes are enormous, with the possibility of long prison sentences hanging over their careers. Across hip-hop's 52-year run, the justice system has repeatedly collided with artists who helped define the culture. In some situations, prosecutors have been accused of leaning on censorship, bias, or outdated laws to target performers. In others, certain artists appear unable to fully separate themselves from the pull of the streets. That difference matters. Every rapper dealing with criminal charges is not necessarily tied to the culture of silence Williams was talking about. Plenty of these cases center on personal conduct and individual decisions. Allegations involving homicide, drug distribution, and firearms were already being investigated long before Williams spoke publicly or 50 Cent's documentary was released. What changed is the atmosphere around those investigations. Williams and 50 Cent didn't create those original accusations, but their actions may have made it easier for authorities to expand on them. Speaking out can motivate people with knowledge to step forward. Publicly released footage can hand prosecutors material they may not have previously had access to. Once a larger audience starts paying attention, law enforcement can also face rising pressure to respond. Taken together, it paints a picture of a rap world facing not just old accusations, but a new wave of scrutiny. Pressure changes everything. Once more people step forward, once stronger proof starts stacking up, and once the spotlight from politics gets brighter, authorities are far more likely to move. That momentum creates arrests, and those arrests open the door to a scenario where as many as 20 rappers could end up behind bars. That figure did not come out of nowhere. Count the artists already in custody, add the ones currently fighting criminal charges, include those reportedly being examined by investigators, and factor in anyone who could be tied to unreleased footage, and the total lands somewhere around that number. Each new witness adds weight. Every fresh piece of material strengthens the case. Whenever a documentary, interview, or public statement breaks through the silence, the pressure rises even more. That is exactly what Williams seemed to recognize. He knew his interview was not just another viral moment for viewers to talk about. It had the potential to set off something much bigger. Once that kind of process begins, stopping it becomes incredibly difficult. It keeps moving as long as there's something feeding it. Right now, there is plenty. Unseen footage keeps interest alive. Testimony adds credibility. Lawsuits bring more claims into the open. Federal investigations that are still underway continue to raise the stakes. On top of that, witnesses who stayed quiet before are now reportedly ready to speak, and the public is paying close attention. Now the culture is demanding answers like never before. Katt Williams sparked the conversation, 50 Cent intensified it, and suddenly the entire industry feels under pressure. As this situation unfolds, the rappers watching it happen seem to fit into three groups. One group is already incarcerated. They're facing the results of their own choices and have little power to shape what comes next. Another group consists of those reportedly under investigation. For them, the strategy is simple. Hire attorneys, keep silent, and hope the spotlight moves elsewhere. The third group is where the real tension sits. These are the people who understand they benefited from the system, yet their names have not surfaced publicly. Every new development raises the stakes. Every new documentary, every revealing interview, and any leaked footage could be the moment that pushes them into public view.
For that last group, Katt Williams delivered a chilling warning. On Club Shay Shay, he said it calmly, almost playfully, but the meaning landed hard. He believed the truth would come out. At the time, some people brushed it off. Looking back now, it sounds far less like a bold opinion and much more like a forecast. All lies will be exposed. That line does not come across as a threat. It feels like an expectation. And judging by everything that has unfolded since, it is becoming harder and harder to ignore.
It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is. All lies will be exposed.
On January 3rd, 2024, something long anticipated began unfolding in plain sight. What once looked like a quiet code of protection is no longer merely breaking apart. It is giving way completely. As that shield disappears, the very people that once sheltered are being left exposed, isolated, and increasingly cornered. Behind the scenes, attorneys are moving non-stop. Public relations teams are racing to shape the story. Social media pages are suddenly going silent. Meanwhile, federal investigators have not eased up and are still making visits. The idea that 20 rappers could end up behind bars is not some exaggerated headline. Based on the legal climate right now, that figure may actually be on the low side. Up to this point, every major development, the Williams interview, the documentary, the arrests, and the court cases, has felt less like the main event and more like the opening act. What truly has the music world uneasy is the next phase. What comes out next? Who gets named? How far does this really go? One detail stands out above all the rest. 50 Cent reportedly has 140 hours of footage. Only 4 episodes have been released. Everything else remains with him, and nothing suggests he has finished telling this story. Katt Williams even called attention to that gap, criticizing 50 Cent's documentary by saying it was not the full vault. In his view, audiences have only seen a small portion, more like the first few chapters than the complete picture. The story kept going. What aired wasn't an exposure, it was just a light dusting. Williams even described the documentary as a trailer, not the feature, not the complete story, a trailer. In other words, he was signaling that the Netflix version only hinted at a much larger picture waiting behind the curtain. Judging by the uneasy laughs and low murmurs from the audience, plenty of people seemed to take that message seriously. 50 fired back with a response that felt funny on the surface and unsettling underneath. "Katt, I love you because you talk like my conscience after tequila," he said. The line got a laugh, yet what came next carried even more weight. He added, "Besides, if I told all the secrets, you wouldn't have no jokes left. I'm protecting your tour, my boy." Look closely at what he actually said. He never pushed back on the idea that there was more to reveal. Nowhere did he claim Williams had it wrong. Instead, his point was simple. If he opened the vault completely, there would be nothing left for Williams to turn into material. That sounds less like a denial and more like a joke wrapped around a warning that the bigger story may still be ahead. Jackson has also made it clear that this project is deeply personal, while stressing that it reaches beyond a private dispute. As he told GQ, "This is bigger than just me and him. It's about the truth coming out." According to 50 Cent, what's unfolding isn't about one documentary dropping and ending there. He's pointing to something bigger, an ongoing chain of events. It began with the Club Shay interview, gained momentum with the documentary, and now seems headed toward another chapter. That raises the real mystery. What happens next? One obvious option is a second documentary. After Sean Combs' The Reckoning pulled 21.8 million views in just 6 days and became the second most watched title on Netflix that week, the business case is impossible to ignore. Netflix can see the demand. 50 Cent knows there is still plenty of material available.
Viewers also sensed that the first release only scratched the surface. A follow-up could go in several directions. It might spotlight the people whose names never made it into the first film. Another angle could dig into the larger industry system that Williams talked about. There's also the possibility of examining the legal consequences that follow the documentary's release. Most intriguing of all, it could finally tap into the reported 136 hours of unseen footage. Another path would be even more explosive. Instead of working through Netflix, 50 Cent could put material out on his own and speak directly to the audience. That kind of move could spark a massive online reaction almost instantly. No studio oversight, no platform shaping the message, just raw content delivered straight to the public. Just the evidence, no studio gatekeepers, no attorneys screening it first, no editors shaping the narrative. Simply unfiltered footage dropped straight onto social media for everyone to examine. Should that happen, the fallout on the legal side could be massive. If the material includes what many suspect, investigators may treat it as evidence in active cases. Prosecutors could demand it through subpoenas. Civil attorneys might build lawsuits around it. In the most serious scenario, it could even open the door to entirely new criminal matters.
Another route is even more explosive. The footage never goes public at all and is delivered straight to law enforcement. If 50 Cent decides the strongest move is putting it directly in the hands of federal investigators, several cases could gain momentum at once. Suddenly, prosecutors might gain access to private conversations, phone records, and key moments they were previously unable to verify. That kind of material can change everything. From there, the chain reaction could be dramatic. New charges may follow. Additional arrests become more likely. Courtrooms that were never part of the story before could suddenly be pulled into it. Each of these outcomes points to the same unsettling conclusion. The circle of people facing legal trouble could grow fast. That is why talk about 20 rappers ending up behind bars is being treated as more than internet gossip. It is increasingly being viewed as a serious warning about where this situation may be headed. The people in the greatest danger are not the rappers tied to one-off incidents. The real pressure is building around those who were connected to the machine itself. These are the artists who showed up at gatherings they never should have entered, made calls that should have never happened, put their names on paperwork they should have avoided, and sat in meetings they had no business being part of. For a long time, many of them seemed convinced the code of silence would hold. They believed the recordings would stay hidden, the witnesses would stay quiet, and prosecutors would never trace the trail back to them. That confidence is starting to look shaky. With each day, the protection they counted on appears weaker. Whenever Katt Williams sits down for another interview, the topic comes roaring back. Each time 50 Cent posts online, the rumors grow louder and more intense. Every new lawsuit brings fresh attention and adds more names to the conversation. And whenever a cooperating witness speaks with federal investigators, the circle gets wider. What makes this even more explosive is that the story refuses to fade. Instead, it keeps resurfacing from different directions, pulling more focus toward the people who thought they were safely in the background. Williams framed his position clearly in his public remarks, saying there is no such thing as our side and God's side. None of it is even real. And that he had to step forward and say it. He stepped in to make one point unmistakably clear. Not everyone belongs in the same category. That was the heart of his response. In his view, if his statement had been false, someone would have challenged it immediately. Instead, the silence spoke volumes. He framed his position as standing on God's side, and the larger message was about more than gossip or headlines. He was pointing to forces and patterns he believes go far beyond random chance. Williams presented this as a question of right and wrong, not merely something for the courts to sort out. His argument was simple but unsettling. Staying quiet can make a person part of the problem. Anyone who knew what was happening and chose not to speak, he suggested, carries some level of blame for the outcome. Of course, moral blame and legal guilt are not identical. Still, the two can meet when silence turns into active concealment. Knowing about a crime and helping keep it hidden is a crime. Knowing about trafficking and assisting in a cover-up is a crime. Knowing about financial fraud and profiting from it is a crime.
That is where the pressure starts building. Once a wall of secrecy begins to crack, every hidden favor, every quiet benefit, and every effort to keep the truth buried can suddenly come under scrutiny. That possibility is exactly why the hip-hop industry is so uneasy right now. A new wave of charges may not depend on fresh discoveries at all. What could matter most is whether information already known can now be used to support criminal cases. According to 50 Cent, he had been suspicious of the alleged misconduct for years, and he says the documentary was already being developed before the September 2024 arrest. If he had doubts that far back, it raises an obvious question. Who else had those same suspicions? Plenty of people may have seen warning signs. The real issue is whether anyone stayed silent. If prosecutors believe individuals had knowledge and chose not to speak up, those people could soon be asked hard questions about what they knew and exactly when they knew it.
This is a lot of the personal footage of Diddy. It shocked a lot of people. And I know, 50, the way you run, this cannot be all that you have. Is there other stuff that you just have not shown? Who's going to be the next docuseries about?
That's where this story becomes much bigger than a single documentary. The key may not be limited to what appears on camera. Just as important is what the footage suggests behind the scenes, especially when it comes to others who may have been aware. Once investigators begin following that trail, the circle of people facing possible consequences could expand fast. Meanwhile, one number has taken over online conversation: 20 rappers going to jail. That claim has spread widely ever since Katt Williams made his prediction and 50 Cent released his documentary. No one can say for sure how many people, if any, will ultimately face charges. Still, the conditions are there for that total to be approached or even surpassed. The footage is there. Witnesses are there. The fallout keeps growing. Court cases are stacking up, federal probes are still active, and the culture of silence that shielded powerful people for years appears to be cracking for good. What's happening between Katt Williams and 50 Cent clearly isn't finished. Each remark, repost, and resurfaced clip feels like another clue in a mystery audiences are trying to piece together. On the surface, their exchanges may seem playful, even humorous. Underneath that tone, though, there's a clear sense of calculation, guarded moves, and influence being carefully managed.
Meanwhile, the public stays locked in. People are watching, guessing, and arguing, pooled between entertainment and unease. Everyone senses the same thing. The biggest decisions in situations like this are usually the ones made quietly, far from the spotlight. That's where things stand now. This story is still unfolding. New moves are happening behind the scenes, and the most significant ones may still be ahead. 50 Cent reportedly has footage. Williams says he has information he has chosen not to reveal. Federal authorities continue their work, while the industry looks on with a mix of caution, concern, and anticipation. To understand the moment, it helps to zoom out. Back in January 2024, Katt Williams publicly warned that the long-standing code of silence was nearing its breaking point. According to him, the people who had stayed protected for years were no longer guaranteed that protection. For years, certain people seemed untouchable. According to him, that protection was about to end. He warned that the truth would come out. Every false story would be uncovered, and the fallout was closer than anyone expected. Not long after, events began moving fast. Arrests followed, lawsuits piled up, more witnesses stepped forward. Behind the scenes, the industry was thrown into chaos. At that moment, 50 Cent released his documentary, and it immediately changed the conversation. In just its first week, more than 20 million people watched it. Viewers were shown footage the public had never seen, along with accounts that had never been shared on that scale before. Even more striking, the film suggested there was a much larger body of evidence still being kept from the public. Inside the industry, the reaction was obvious: panic. People worried about what those recordings might reveal, whose names could surface, and what the consequences would be if more material came out. The public responded very differently. Interest exploded. Audiences wanted more details, more answers, and more accountability. That clash is what keeps this story gaining momentum.
Whenever public curiosity grows, the pressure on 50 Cent to reveal additional material rises with it. Each time he hints that more footage exists, anxiety inside the industry gets even stronger. As that tension builds, cooperation becomes more likely, because fear has a way of making people talk before the full story reaches daylight. Once the truth starts coming out, the pressure shifts fast. Anyone who feels vulnerable suddenly has every reason to speak with prosecutors before the story gets bigger. That is how you end up watching rapper after rapper get pulled into the system. It does not happen in one dramatic moment or a single massive crackdown. Instead, it unfolds piece by piece across months and even years. Bit by bit, the case grows stronger. More evidence surfaces, more witnesses decide to speak, and investigations finally reach the finish line. Williams sparked the chain reaction. 50 Cent helped bring key material into the spotlight. After that, the legal process moved in the way it usually does, slowly, carefully, and without letting up. What matters here goes far beyond courtrooms and charges. For hip-hop, these moments hit on a much deeper level. When a major artist is sent to prison, the impact spreads everywhere. Supporters lose someone whose music meant something to them. Record labels lose a major source of income. Creative partners lose an important collaborator. The culture itself loses a voice that once shaped the conversation. Still, there is another reality people cannot ignore. Each arrest carries a warning. It reminds everyone that fame and wealth do not erase accountability. Silence cannot shield people forever. Eventually, those who take advantage of others, mistreat people, or use influence in harmful ways may be forced to answer for it. This is the double edge of it all. What Katt Williams and 50 Cent have unleashed feels bigger than celebrity drama. It marks a turning point. At the same time, it looks like a long overdue cleanup. Suddenly, the entertainment world is being pushed to face the parts it has avoided for years. Painful as that process may be, it could open the door to a culture that is far more honest and responsible. A director connected to 50 Cent's project put it plainly. This story acts like a mirror, showing not just the stars involved, but the public that helped place them on an untouchable pedestal. The hope behind the documentary is bigger than headlines. It's meant to challenge the way people idolize fame and remind everyone that celebrities are still human beings. Beneath the spectacle, the recordings, and the legal fallout, a deeper theme is taking shape. This is about accountability. It's about the risk of treating powerful people like they're beyond criticism. It's about what silence can protect and what truth can expose once it finally comes forward. Katt Williams appeared to recognize that the moment he sat down with Shannon Sharpe in January 2024. By choosing to speak, he set off a chain reaction. Once the truth enters the conversation, it becomes difficult to contain. From that point on, the fallout is no longer fully in anyone's control. He framed it as a turning point. Calling himself an enemy of the Illuminati, Katt Williams argued that 2024 was no accident. In his view, the culture had crossed into what he described as the age of truth, a moment when comedy stops being just entertainment and starts reflecting what others are too afraid to say. Whether or not you buy into his exact theory, the developments are hard to ignore. Since January 2024, more information about the hip-hop industry has surfaced than many people believe came out in the last 20 years combined. Authorities have made more arrests, civil cases have continued to pile up, additional witnesses have stepped forward, new video evidence has also entered public view.
What makes this even more striking is that the story still appears to be unfolding. The reported 140 hours of footage have yet to be fully released. Federal probes remain ongoing. Lawsuits continue to expand. People cooperating with investigators are still providing details. At this stage, the debate is no longer about whether more rappers could face prison time. The real mystery is the scale of what may still be ahead. A lot of attention online has focused on the number 20,
because of how closely it has become tied to Katt Williams and this narrative. Even so, when everything finally settles, that total could end up being much higher. For years, a wall of silence shielded far too many people. For years, too many people were covered by a wall of silence. Now that wall has collapsed, and what's coming out reaches every corner. Any rapper tied to that machine, anyone who gained from it, helped keep it running, or knew what was happening and said nothing, is suddenly facing a very different reality. Silence no longer offers safety. Recorded material may surface at any moment. Witnesses now feel strong enough to speak openly. At the same time, investigators are looking into the music business from several directions at once. That shift didn't happen in a vacuum. Katt Williams and 50 Cent helped force that change into the spotlight. Maybe not by design. Williams was making jokes, but many of them landed because they pointed at real issues. Meanwhile, 50 Cent was creating a documentary that ended up hitting far harder than many expected. Put those two forces together, and the impact has been massive.
Even like in the rap world, like all of the rappers that you know that never been to jail and never got in any trouble with the law, but they talk as if their life is opposite of that. Like those are federal informants.
What followed has reshaped the legal environment around hip-hop in a way that could leave a mark for years, possibly even decades. For the 20 rappers who could end up facing prison because of it, the warning could not be more direct. The structure they counted on to keep them safe is no longer there. The code of silence that once hid everything has been shattered. Now, the truth is moving on its own timeline, and it may be impossible to stop. Secrets that were meant to stay buried are now coming to light. Katt Williams warned that the truth would surface, and up to this point, his prediction has kept unfolding. The documentary was only the opening chapter. More footage still exists. Ongoing investigations have not stopped. Whatever comes next is still moving forward. For hip-hop, this feels like a defining moment. One path leads to honesty, accountability, and a stronger future. The other is denial, silence, and the hope that public attention fades away. Yet with everything Katt Williams and 50 Cent have already set in motion, ignoring it no longer seems possible. Now the pressure is impossible to miss. Video evidence remains. People are speaking. Legal consequences are no longer a distant possibility. Whether the number is 20 rappers or even more, the result of years of silence appears to be catching up at last. What makes this story even more explosive is the scale of it all. A 3-hour interview sparked the conversation. A 4-part Netflix documentary pushed it further. On top of that, there are still 140 hours of footage the public has not seen. That is what gives this moment so much weight. It is no longer just rumor, gossip, or industry whispers. It has become something much bigger. And the biggest mystery still hanging in the air is simple. Who gets exposed next? If Katt Williams truly called it correctly, the answer may be everyone who chose deception. This federal case is still unfolding, and there is no clear finish line in sight. Every piece appears connected. The wall of silence has started to crack wide open. Video evidence is out there. Witnesses have begun speaking up, and the courts are now taking action. The idea of 20 rappers ending up behind bars is no longer just talk online. It looks more and more like a path already being laid out. At the center of that shift are 2 men who chose to speak instead of staying quiet. Because of that decision, the music industry may be heading into a moment it cannot undo. Katt Williams warned that a reckoning was on the way. 50 Cent brought the first major chapter to the public. What happens next could reveal just how far this story really reaches. For years, powerful circles seemed to shield their own. Now that shield appears to be failing. Those who once relied on that protection are starting to learn what it means when it suddenly disappears. Secrets are coming into the light. That was the warning from the beginning, and now it seems to be playing out step by step through arrests, documentaries, and new claims surfacing one after another. Online audiences are locked in. Federal authorities are still at work, and somewhere Katt Williams is likely watching it all unfold, knowing he said this moment was coming long before many people believed him.